For the last 150 episodes, this is something that I knew I had to put together. An environment for recruiters to grow. Kicking off September 15th is the Elite Recruiter Community. And here's the thing, all the previous summits, all the future summits are going to be part of the community. Finish the Year Strong, the Firm Owner Summit, the Sales and BD Summit, the AI Summit that we just had are all going to be part of it. On top of that, we're going to have roundtables. We're going to have split opportunities. We're going to have a place where recruiters can connect with other recruiters and grow. Starting September 15th, the founder pricing is going to be $37 a month. That will lock you in for $37 a month, where you can get access to all the previous summits and all the future summits. At the end of September, the price is going to go up to $49. So make sure to lock in a founder pricing now. Get excited about growing, get excited about connecting, and let's go crush our dreams together. Coming up on this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast.
You didn't grow up with the life that you have now. Like, you grew up, if I remember right, a single mom.
Yep.
Poverty, evictions. Like, how did those hardships end up shaping you?
Yeah, so you don't even know that you're going through hardships at the time, right? Because it's the only life that you've ever known. I was always the most successful person in every single room that I was in. I think that was holding my growth and development back. And I think that surrounding myself with the right people who I respected and admired was probably the very first thing that I did to help me kind of change my mindset.
Welcome to the Elite Recruiter Podcast with your host, Benjamin Mena, where we focus on what it takes to win in the recruiting game. We cover it all from sales, marketing, mindset, money, leadership, and placements.
The market's noisy right now. Everyone's using AI, automation, outreach, and most of it sounds the same. If you're a recruitment founder, standing out isn't about doing more, it's about being known. Hoxo's personal brand bootcamp shows you how to build real visibility with the people that matter. Not by going viral, but by showing up consistently and positioning yourself as the go-to in your niche. Their 3X system is helping founders generate inbound leads, strengthen their authority, and grow lean, profitable businesses, often with just a couple of hours a week on LinkedIn. They're giving away a free masterclass that breaks it all down. The link's in the show notes. Check it out before access closes. And if you decide to enroll in the full personal brand bootcamp, you're in luck. Hoxo is giving listeners of the Elite Recruiter Podcast a bonus £500 off the cost of the program. Make sure to tell them we sent you.
I am so excited to have this guest back again. I know he rocked the house last time, and he's going to be one of the featured speakers day one of Finish the Year Strong in October. So make sure you get registered to see him live. But Jeremy Jenson, welcome back to the podcast.
Man, thanks for having me back. We're like LinkedIn brothers from another mother, man. So it's good to see your face again in person live.
Man, like, I know last time maybe I shouldn't have been shocked, but I was surprised at the amount of people that messaged me about our conversation. I hope they message you too.
I got a lot of commentary. I got a lot of people that asked me to be their mentor. And I said, man, I've got 35 employees and I've got plenty of people that I mentor, but I was able to point them in a few different people's directions. So, yeah.
I'm surprised on some of the mentor conversations. Someone wasn't like, hey, can I come work for you? And be one of those mentees.
Yeah, no, I think I was a little bit old school, right? So all of our employees are in office. We don't offer any remote working solutions. And so that's probably the inhibition for people. I think the industry has migrated towards remote work, but who knows? Maybe I'm looking to bring on a partner level person that's open to working remote soon. We'll see.
Well, anyways, we have a lot to chat about. So real quick, I know if you want to go hear Jeremy's origin story, go back to the last episode. We don't need to recap that now. Like, go back to that episode, and I'll have it in the show notes so that way you can easily check it out. So we spoke, it almost feels like a year ago, and you guys are up by, I think, a few $1 million. What the heck has happened since we last spoke?
Yeah, so a lot has happened. Maybe in my personal life, I met a girl. Today is our 1-year anniversary of our first date, as a matter of fact. And we got engaged right at the 6-month mark. And so in May of next year, I'm getting married. And, with that focus on personal and family and growth in that department, I've really done a great job of delegating, investing in mid-level managers and their skills development and communication development. We've got 6 of our leadership team in Vistage now. So that's a peer-to-peer executive advisory group. And so really it's been a big focus on knowledge transfer and empowering mid-level professionals to achieve their potential. And so obviously when you look at the numbers, it's proven to be very successful.
And we're going to we have so much to talk about this, but you guys, your life has completely changed. You're about ready to get married. You're 1 year from meeting her, which is congratulations on that. And I know we spoke offline, but you're about ready to travel over to Europe with her, which is phenomenal. But you also have some of the highest billing recruiters in the state of Texas. I know you guys are part of the Texas State Recruiting Association. The top 10 list came out and I saw your people on there. What are you guys doing behind the scenes?
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much of the secret sauce, right? But what I can say is we are going up market. We're making that decision. And so while it could be very easy to take a lot of the, 80K, 90K, 100K job orders, our average fee is over 70,000 right now, right? And we're a contingency search firm, no retained, right? So just being a little bit pickier, because I'm of the opinion that whether the market is hot or whether the market is slow, rich people are always going to invest in high level professional talent.
Okay, so the last time we spoke, I think your average fee was about $49,000, and now you're saying it's over 70K. Is it
Over 70.
Is it just about moving higher up the food chain?
Higher up the food chain. Yeah, I think I shared last time we spoke that there was a big light bulb moment whenever I was watching Shark Tank way back in 2015, I think it was, whenever Mark Cuban said, hey, the riches are in the niches. And we've really continued to lean into that, right? And so we're predominantly focused on working with private equity and venture capital backed companies. The second that they get that growth capital, we want to help them build commercial teams and leadership teams in order to help them grow.
So, how are you guys doing that as an organization? Is it the recruiter doing it? Is it the team behind the recruiter? I know you don't want to share your secret sauce, but how are you setting up these recruiters to be able to dive in there like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, truth be told, it's been a little bit more of a rebrand that was required, right? Creating consistent content and putting that in the hands of people that need to see it, right? My background in 2010, I started a lead generation business. And I would say that that's one thing that I do very, very well is generate leads for our recruiting teams. But, in the way that, buyers want to be sold to now, it's a little bit less of a focus on lead generation and more of a focus on demand generation, right? And so we've done an incredible job of being consistent on celebrating a lot of our wins on social media, right? Today we just had a CEO placement start at a big local brand here in Houston. And so, celebrating those president, executive VP, C-level placements, that resonates with other operating partners at portfolio companies or private equity and venture capital operating companies. And so, it's really been fully integrating branding, being seen in the public by individuals that you want to be seen with, right? And having an integrated marketing approach in order to grow top line revenue.
So you guys are doing this all contingent. Why aren't you guys flipping over to more of a retained search?
Yeah, we've had high profile recruiters that have worked here in the past that have ran their individual desk on retained, right? Because it's difficult to, scale your personal time. But I'm of the opinion as a business owner that, I would rather have, let's say, a 60% close ratio on 300 job orders a year, right? Or I guess it would be closer to 400 job orders than a 90% close ratio on 100, right? Because, at the end of the day, our recruiters get paid on what they produce. And so it makes no difference to me whether or not it's retained or whether it's contingent as a business owner. But I can see that on the individual desk, the power of running a retained model.
I know you've talked about the riches of the niches, but every now and then, I've always wondered, there's so much business out there in other places. How do you keep yourself from going wide instead of as you stay deep?
Yeah, discipline, focus, right? We also recruit in some other verticals that are non-PE or VC, right? We recruit in the wealth management space, we recruit for law firms, But that's a perfect example, right? Because people always ask me, why don't you recruit in-house corporate legal roles? Why do you only focus on law firm recruitment? And the fact of the matter is, a client doesn't necessarily need to beat me up over fee whenever the person that they hire generates revenue for the firm, right? And so if we find a good mid-career litigation partner that's got a $3 million book of business, paying me a 25% contingency fee on her $500,000 draw, right? That's a no-brainer, because if she actually brings over her book of business, she's going to bring in $3 million a year in billables. So paying me $125,000 as a recruiting fee is just a no-brainer.
Love that. Now, one of the things that I've watched you guys do that most recruiting firms don't do, like typically in a recruiting firm, you hire like 25 recruiters and maybe like 5 salespeople. You've actually hired managers, you've hired learning and development, you've hired a media specialist, you've hired an EOS person. Like, why are all these other hires sometimes helping you guys make more money than the people that have just hired just straight recruiting and straight salespeople?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that I attribute that to the fact that I didn't work at a contingency recruiting firm before I started my business, right? My role models are people like Alex Hormozy, right? And Cody Sanchez, and the people that are building systems and processes in order to scale. I don't have an antiquated recruiting model where I want to pay people as little as possible and give them a super massive commission plan. I'd rather bring in individuals that fit the mission, vision, and core values, and build a world-class infrastructure around them in order to help accelerate their growth, right? And so I would really say it's a matter of building the system and not necessarily having a focus on people that could bring in a portable book of business.
You mentioned Hormozy, and I know Hormozy just launched a brand new book. Have you listened to it at all yet?
I have not, but I saw that he's in the Guinness Book of World Records now because of it, right? Fastest to 100 million copies sold.
Looking back on all the stuff that you've seen about Hormozy, what is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned from him that you've actually implemented in the recruiting world?
Implemented in the recruiting world, nothing really stands out. I love the fact that he puts Layla at the forefront, right? He gives her a tremendous amount of credit on why he stays focused and disciplined. There's no secret that she is his business partner. And while the brand may be associated with his last name, she's the one that's kind of running the operations of the business. And so I would say that one thing that I took from him and implementing in my personal life is going out and finding that partner that was going to help me take my life to the next level, not just my business.
I want to go 2 different ways with this. So I'm going to start off by going back to Hormozy.
Yeah.
And just all the stuff that he's done. Is that also why that you're a little more out front and open about like you're sharing on social media? Is it because of people like him and Cody?
Without a doubt. Absolutely. Yep. And one thing that I learned very early on is that anywhere from 10 to 15% of the people that view my content, whether it's on Instagram or LinkedIn, right? You're going to always have those haters, right? The people that talk shit, the people that spread rumors. But it's really those 85% of the people that vibe with you that really strengthen that bond with your persona, right? And it's those 85% that turn into raving fans and influencers and people that speak highly of the brand and the community. And so really, leaning a little bit more into the idea of showcasing my authentic self is something that I really took away from Alex.
I know when we spoke last time, you were actually actively working on so many different parts of your life. I think you said you had a coach for like life, you had a coach for love, or you had a coach for this. And you said, I was like, hey, like I am looking for that life partner. And I swear to God, it was like almost a month later, I see like you on Instagram, like, hey, going on a date or something of that nature. Going into that, like the amount of preparation that you were doing for yourself behind the scenes, do you think that's what helped you get there?
Absolutely. And I think that translates to business as well. I think there's a lot of small businesses that think that they're qualified to go out there and solicit rainmakers with these big scalable books of business. But are they the right shop set up to lure and attract that individual, right? The way that translates to your personal life is I think that we all want amazing, romantic partners, but are we in the best position ourselves in order to attract that person, right? And I think that if you're willing to do the self-work, right, and put in the time, effort, and discipline in order to get there, I think that we all have the opportunity to achieve what we want in the long term.
And you kind of took up the direction I was going to ask you, but I want you to go deeper on that. Like behind the scenes, when it comes to the recruiting business, when it comes to either you being a recruiter, you being a salesperson, you being a firm owner, what did that personal development actually look like behind the scenes? Because we all see the outcome, we
Yep.
don't see the work.
Yeah. So, I think back all the way to getting started in January of 2013, whenever we kind of like changed the business model from a lead generation firm to a direct hire recruiting firm. It took me a good 3 to 4 years to even hit $1 million in annual billings, right? But I think that we all know whenever you own a small shop in direct hire recruiting, especially in contingency, when the recruiters are on a draw, I was making like $700,000 on that 1 million in billings, right? And I was always the most successful person in every single room that I was in. I think that was holding my growth and development back. In 2018, whenever I joined the Entrepreneurs Organization, I wasn't in rooms where people were making $1 million a year. I was in rooms where people were making $1 million a month. And I saw that these were some of the kindest, most humble, most grateful people that were not workaholics, right? They were investing in time with their children. They were doing fun things with their spouses, right? They were heavily diversified. They didn't just have their main business that was the 7-figure generator, right? And I think that surrounding myself with the right people who I respected and admired was probably the very first thing that I did to help me kind of change my mindset and outgrow that, hey, 700 grand in personal income is success, right? And so that was really the first thing that I did, was joining EO. That forced me to start implementing EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. That then led me to the idea of bringing in a vice president to help me commercialize a new practice area, and then eventually a chief operations officer to help me scale processes and systems. And so surrounding myself with people who I respected and admired that would push me to grow, and then finding people that were better than me in business development and operations was also important, because I could be the strategic growth catalyst, the really good marketer, but I didn't need to be the best recruiter. I didn't need to be the best mentor, the best advisor, the best coach, or the best rainmaker, because I could be the one that was the director of the show. I didn't need to be the main actor.
While you were making this transformation, like mentally without knowing it, were you battling any like limiting beliefs that like could have held you back?
That's an interesting question. Nothing specifically comes to mind. I think that, as an entrepreneur, I'm kind of like overly optimistic. And I had a meeting this morning with the wealth advisor who pointed that out to me. And so I would say that I never really had a specific limiting belief where I didn't think that I was going to be successful in an endeavor that I was pursuing. I think on the other end of that side, I'm probably a little bit overconfident with a lot of my ideas, right? And I think that's a common characteristic of successful entrepreneurs, is once we have an idea, we execute quickly. And I think that's probably contributed to my success in business, is I don't overanalyze or overthink of why something would fail. And so as far as self-limiting beliefs, I think that there's probably one that's still holding me back today. There's a buddy of mine that I know through Honcho Pickleball. His name is Eric Johnston. He owns a management consulting firm. He came from Robert Half, where he had built their consulting practice, and now he started his own. And I look at the economics on what he makes on deploying a consultant inside of his Fortune 1000 clients. And it's like, man, a direct hire recruiting fee is real nice. But if I can make $1,000 a week on a spread for a controller on site, why wouldn't I get into that? And so I think that's one thing that's holding me back right now, is recognizing that I may be successful in direct hire recruiting and leaving money on the table in the consulting.
Mm. Now, looking back at your team, you've hired some very key people, like, that have implemented EOS, which that sounds like that was an absolute game changer. But outside of that person, you've hired learning director, you've hired media, you've hired other stuff. What has been one of the most impactful hires outside of the EOS implementer?
Interesting. I mean, there's so many different impact players in the organization. What I can say is we'll use the manager of learning and development. That was her title whenever she started. And the reason why I hired Jacqueline Valle is because I was the bottleneck whenever it came to growing the organization, right? I was making a couple $1,000,000 a year, and the thought of increasing my work week by another 20 or 30 hours, it was just terrifying to me. I didn't want to do it, right? The cost didn't outweigh the return that would be needed to invest in it. And so I looked at, okay, what did I need to do? Okay, internal hiring, right? Implementing standards and operating procedures, making sure that people were trained on the proper systems and technology, right? Holding hands, going on client meetings, go to networking events, all these different things I just had literally no interest in doing. And so I knew that if I wanted to pull somebody from the industry, if they were a rock star A player, they were probably making a ton of commission by being a leader or running a recruiting desk. And so I looked at needing to hire the right person, right? That respected me, that believed in the vision of the organization. And so I was talking to my COO, Scott Kelly, and we were looking at all the characteristics that we wanted in that person. And the light bulb went off. And it was like, oh man, I wonder if Jacqueline would be interested. Jacqueline was my friend for 5 years before even considering joining Encore Search Partners. She was actually running HR for a tax consulting firm. And I reached out to her. And the reason why we kind of gave her that title of manager of learning and development is because in order for her to have the trust and respect of her colleagues, right, she needed to understand the business, right? She needed to have visibility into recruiting, training, onboarding, be knowledgeable of all of our systems and technology. And then you fast forward 2 years later, Jacqueline was actually promoted to senior manager of growth and development, which is encompassing of internal recruiting, systems training, and then also business development and marketing for our organization as well. And so it would have been a crippling hire if I would have brought in a senior manager that didn't have any industry experience just because she was my friend, right? That first 2 years of her learning the business was an incredible growth catalyst for the organization.
Like, how often do you guys train your people? Is it like training every week? What does training actually look like at your organization with her?
That's probably a better question for her. Me as the visionary and the person that's focused on strategic marketing, I really do a great job of delegating and elevating, right? And I know that training is done by team leaders on a daily basis, if not hourly. Whenever it comes to formal classroom style training, that's done once a week, for every single team that we've got in the organization. But if you were to ask me, what are we training on, right? I would say that that's definitely more of her domain.
So you mentioned something a second ago. It made me think of a new question for you. And this is, guys, this is kind of like running just a long, quick fire question of all these ideas that I wanted to ask last time, but really didn't get the chance. Are you billing right now?
Man, I haven't billed since 2020, bro. No, 0%. If literally a client walked in the door and said, Jeremy, I want you to do a job order intake, I'm giving that to one of my senior recruiters. They have more visibility and insight into the current market than I do. I promise you that, right? And to the same token, right? If a candidate wanted to walk in and say, hey, please represent me, I'm going to flip it to a recruiter that has experience in their practice area, right? I'm the marketing guy. And that's what gives me a tremendous amount of satisfaction. My love language is words of affirmation, right? And so if I can be seen all over social media and people can see me at an event and say, hey, Jeremy, I love your content. Congratulations on winning that award. That's what feeds my desire to win, right? Whenever it comes to determining whether or not we can get this CFO candidate a 20% raise on his guaranteed first year comp, hey, I leave that up to Mike Lindley to negotiate that.
How did you finally step away from being a billing person?
Yeah. So if I were to put it into numbers, I would say the decision was made whenever we were about 4 million in revenue. And that 4 million in revenue, any successful direct hire recruiting firm owner is probably making about 1.5 to $2 million. Okay. And so having the humility to say, I'm going to invest in mid-level leadership that can make sure that they're holding people accountable to achieve their goals even better than I can. And so carving out about $500,000 a year in base compensation and putting it into people that can help, accelerate that growth was a pretty It required a tremendous amount of discipline and foresight. And so whenever you say, how did you do it? It was not asking one of my high-level recruiters to be a leader. That wasn't it. It was hiring a great leader, showing him the way that Jeremy Jenson and Encore Search Partners does recruiting, and then letting that leader be the leader of the home run hitters. I think that was the growth catalyst for our organization, is we didn't just promote the rainmakers.
Did you struggle letting go?
I would probably say that it was not a struggle for me, but the reason why is I was 100% okay if that leader that I had put in that roster spot to lead that team, I was okay with whatever the outcome was. And I wasn't in a position where I was willing to pull the rug out from under them 90 days in, 6 months in. I gave them really good runways in order to see the kind of influence that they could create, right? Now, mind you, during this period of time, we were implementing processes and systems. And while we may have even turned over some of those mid-level leaders, the next leader that I put in that roster spot 2 years after that person took that seat, I was able to take all that data. What did they do right? What did they do wrong? What characteristic can I make sure that I don't mishire and I can focus on in this new, hire? It was an incredible learning experience for our organization. And so I didn't necessarily struggle with getting out of the way because I was always observing, right? I was always looking at the data and seeing what that told me. And the next hire, I could make sure I didn't miss.
So back to the Texas recruiting organization, I forget the name of them. They're top recruiters in the state, billing wise. I've seen you guys up there just absolutely crushing it. How do you guys go find these high level, high performing recruiters that can just dominate?
Yeah, great question. So last year, Evan Frisk on my team billed 1.84 million in direct hire billings, double-sided. Okay. And so when you say, how did you go out and find him? I think the key was I didn't find him. He found us. Okay. We do a great job of highlighting our wins on social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. And there's a different narrative behind each post based on each individual platform. But Evan was actually somebody that I had met in 2019 whenever I was going through kind of like an exploratory Jesus learning and development 8-week program at a local church here in Houston. Evan was in my small focus group and we became Facebook friends. And at the time, he was a college professor. And we became Facebook friends, and he had followed me for about 7 months until he slid into my DMs one day. And he said, "Hey, Jeremy, I want to look at making a career change. I noticed that you had a very nice car in the parking lot. I noticed that you hosted that happy hour at your house, which was a very nice home. You've obviously done very well for yourself. Can we have a discussion about what it would look like in me coming to be a revenue producer at Encore Search Partners?" Right. And so it's essentially recognizing that we're always marketing the organization and that we're trying to create demand for these people that resonate with our mission, vision, and values that want to achieve financial success. Right. And that's what we do really well at Encore Search Partners. Right. And so when I look at the 4 people that are over $1 million a year in production on the Encore team, one was a college professor. I met him at church, basically. One was a special education teacher. I met her at McIntyre's local patio bar here in Houston. One was actually a bartender who I'd met at another patio bar, right? Who had just gotten her degree in finance and international business, right? And then the other one was a business development rep working for a used car dealership. And she just used to work with one of our senior recruiters. And so I guess what I'm getting at is we don't go out and find $1 million billers and ask them to work for Encore Search. We go out and find people that are hungry, that are focused, disciplined, grateful, resilient, and competitive. And given our systems, tools, and resources, we turn them into $1 million.
One more time, your $1 million billers, run through their backgrounds one more time before they started.
College professor, special education teacher, bartender, and BDR rep at a used car dealership.
I love that.
And they've all experienced the financial security that have transformed their life, right? So when they're getting DMs from guys like you, right, trying to recruit them for another opportunity for another recruiting firm, they're ignoring it because they're saying, hey, look, my company invested in me whenever I didn't have the same market value. And I want to continue to build something special because it aligns with my personal values, right? That's another really cool thing is we invest in people's personal development, not just their professional development as well.
How do you guys do that?
So for many years, we had an on-site, we called her a performance and mindset coach. Her name is Mahtab Murati. And so think about basically small focus groups, helping coach and develop people to overcome burnout, imposter syndrome, help eliminate self-limiting beliefs, right? Help increase their confidence and then ultimately confidence, right? And so we said, hey, we've got training and mentorship down from a business standpoint. Let's help them become better versions of themselves outside of the office, right? And when Mahtab left, we brought in a new gentleman. His name is Tamer Malati. He's the managing partner of a large, actually, therapy and counseling firm here in Houston. And he's brought a completely different set of curriculum into the organization, right? And so helping people become better spouses, better parents, right? Investing in their focus and development on living a life of physical activity, right? And reducing alcohol consumption and helping people become the absolute best version of themselves will always give any business owner a return on that investment that you make.
So you guys went and hired your own windy roads.
That's where I got the idea, baby. 100%. And that's another thing that I do really well. Is I watch TV shows and I'm like, I need to do that. You know, and I kind of mentioned earlier Mark Cuban on Shark Tank, right? Which was a big, I would say, inspiration for me. I'd mentioned Hormozy, right? Certainly Harvey Specter, right? And the role that he played in the TV show Suits was a great mentor who I respected and admired for a long period of time. And his growth and development from an arrogant, cocky junior partner to a self-aware, humble, and grateful named partner, right? And so these are all people who I looked up to that I could emulate my own growth and success, not just financially, but personally as well.
Finish the year strong is going to be the most impactful summit of the year. Every single summit we have held up until this point is preparing for this one. So that way it can propel you to have the strongest quarter yet. Finish the year strong. It's kicking off October 13th and you do not want to miss this. Get registered now. I want to jump over to a little more on the personal side. Combination of like research and our last conversation, like you didn't grow up with the life that you have now. Like you grew up, if I remember right, a single mom.
Yep.
Poverty, evictions. Like how did those hardships end up shaping you?
Yeah, you know, so you don't even know that you're going through hardships at the time, right? Because it's the only life that you've ever known. But what I can say is, you know, my mom had me at 16 years old. She was a high school dropout. And for many years, we lived with my grandparents and had a good relationship with my grandma, who was an ESL teacher. My grandfather was already retired by the time I was born. And by the time my mom had enough financial security to start getting apartments on our own, right, I do vividly remember having to, you know, move out in the middle of the night because we were being evicted. You know, I had gone to 7 different schools by the time I was in the 9th grade, right? And so while some people would have had a very negative reaction to that type of displacement, right, at early adolescent years, I developed the ability to meet strangers, right? And to win and influence others. And I think that the catalyst that bonded everything together is my mom always had me in after school sports, right? Whether it was the A-Leaf Youth Association, you know, football teams, whether it was soccer teams or basketball teams, you know, these were always teams that she put me on, probably because of the free after school care, right? So she didn't have to pay for a babysitter. But that really gave me the opportunity to make friends and win others over.
You've also gone deep on talking about losing your emotional attachment to money. What does that actually mean? And like, how did that happen?
Yeah. So, growing up very, very poor, we were always taught that money was this scarce object, right? That if you had money, you don't want to lose it, right? You want to save it. And, what I would say is experiencing financial success as a very early career entrepreneur, right? You got to remember, I started my first business when I was 25. I'd seen that because I was starting to make decisions out of logic and not out of emotion, that I could put $1 in and get $2 out. And whenever you have, 10 years of compounding that level of return, I started to realize that money is an infinite resource, right? That there is actually like the opposite of a scarcity mindset whenever it comes to it, right? And so I learned that, if I can do a good job of truly understanding the why behind the what, why am I feeling this way? What can I do in order to overcome that feeling, right? Or why do I want that specific, maybe material object or social currency? And what can I implement in order to secure it? That money is just a resource and a mechanism to help me achieve my near and long-term goals. And so to answer your question, what I would say is money is an infinite resource. And as long as you make decisions with your money that align with the logic behind the decisions that we make in our life, that we can live with the consequences. Because if you run your life out of logic, then there's no second guessing everything. You either win or you learn. I think we've heard that expression.
Now, I absolutely love that. And seeing your growth and like everything that you're going on and going through, has your definition of success changed?
Man, I think my definition of success changes every 2 years, right? And I think that's perfectly okay, right? Because, success can be winning a race, right? Success can be closing a deal. Success could be hitting your weight loss milestone, right? I think that success is just a near term achievement. And once you've achieved that near term success, then it's on to the next one, right? But what I can say is the people who I respect and admire, that's probably how I'm going to answer your question. The people who I respect and admire are very different people than who I respect and admired maybe 5 years ago, right? 5 years ago, I was coming out of a 9-year marriage and I was the single guy that had hit the singles market with a couple $1 million in the bank, right? The people who I thought were successful, the ones that were partying and having fun all the time. And then once I achieved that very short-sighted near-term level of success, I realized that living that life left me very empty, isolated, and alone, right? And then I started looking at people that prioritize a life of physical fitness, right? And social activity that didn't circle around alcohol consumption, right? And that introduced me to a life of pickleball and having fun and being competitive on a pickleball court instead of a patio bar, right? To where now in this new season of life, after getting engaged back in February of this year, the people who I respect and admire are very loving husbands, right? They're present fathers. They speak very highly of their spouse in the community, right? And so these are the people who I respect and admire today, who I'm leaning into nurturing my relationships with those individuals.
Some of those new people that you respect are those people that you've been around, you're just now seeing things in a different light?
Absolutely. And what's funny is these might be people who knew me way back in 2019 and 2020, right? And maybe they knew I was a great recruiter, but they sure as hell didn't respect me for the life that I was living back then. Did they find me to be competent in the professional service that I provided? Yes, probably so. But I think that it was very important for me to actually become the individual that was worthy of their respect and admiration in order for us to truly bond and become friends.
This new circle of friendship, and you've said this like the last podcast and earlier in this interview, the people that you surround yourself with like have a huge impact. Do you think a lot of recruiters out there are not surrounding themselves with people that are like pull them?
You probably have more visibility into that answer than me. You know a lot more recruiters, right? What I can say is I probably didn't have a fear of outgrowing friends because I am a good recruiter, right? there wasn't this element of, I don't want to lose my friend that we've been friends since high school or since college, right? Or the first job that we worked together whenever we were 23 years old. That I always knew I had the ability to recruit in my community, right? And that can come off as very arrogant, but I think that it's important to protect your own self-peace, right? That if other individuals aren't pushing you and motivating you and inspiring you to become a better version of yourself, then all you're going to do is fall into complacency and mediocrity, And so what I've focused on to become a better version of myself in the early years, it might have been money, then it was power, then it was influence. In this new season of life, I value more on connection and adventure. These are words that are probably synonymous with my life in 2025.
I love that. And you've mentioned pickleball a few times.
Oh, yeah,
Like, you play it, but you're also an investor.
absolutely.
Talk about that. I've had
Yeah.
multiple people want me to ask you that.
Yeah. I've been playing pickleball for about 2 years now. I did tear my right ACL and needed knee surgery in late 2023. And like every day at physical therapy, I couldn't wait to get back on the pickleball court, man. It was unbelievable. But anyways, I think that it's important that if you want to recreate a brand image of how people perceive you in the community, that it's important to kind of put your money where your mouth is, right? I couldn't just say that I was done with day drinking, right? And living a life of lethargy, right? To where if I put in $100,000 and actually invested in the largest community of amateur pickleball players in the entire United States, Honcho Pickleball, we're in over 63 cities nationwide and have over a community over 20,000 active users. I wanted to be associated with that brand, right? Because then it wasn't me trying to force feed how people needed to perceive me in the community, right? I could be very, very consistent by making a lifestyle change. And so it was also an operator, right? His name is Aaron Sundstrom, who I really respected and admired as a man, right? As a man of faith, as a husband, right? As somebody that had created a very successful business process outsourcing business and successfully sold his equity in that company in order to build Honcho from the ground up. That was just another individual to where I said, hey, let me just give this guy some additional dry powder so we can go out and create something special together. And it's funny because whenever I talk to Yulia, my fiance, she's like, babe, like the fact that every Tuesday night you were out playing pickleball with your friends, that was actually like very sexy, because I don't know if I would have fallen in love with the guy that was out drinking every Tuesday night for guys' night with his friends. And so like having a brand congruent with what you want for your future goals, I think is very important.
You just covered about investing in Honcho Pickleball, which is awesome. But you've also
Yep.
mentioned that, like, offline and other interviews, that you invest in other places too. I truly believe that like recruiters should be putting their money in other places, investing in other organizations, investing in other businesses. With everything going on, like, how do you figure out the time to find the right investments?
That's a great question. What I can say is the investments find me. Remember, I told you that we primarily focus on private equity and venture capital.
Yep.
And so when I look at the 7 private equity operating portcos that I'm invested in, they were all clients that had turned to us to either find salespeople, product line managers, marketing executives, or C-level executives, right? And it wasn't about me investing in the technology. It wasn't about me investing in the potential of how a product could disrupt an industry. It was about me investing in the founder of the company, because I am a personal believer that if you invest in people, then they can always achieve their potential.
Which is awesome. And I love that they find you. Are you also investing in the funds, like the PE funds and the private equity funds and the VC funds yourself?
Yeah, but that's through my wealth management firm, right? That's super vanilla. We're in CAS Investments. We're also in Blackstone and BlackRock's big industrial private equity funds. And so those are the kind of things that are going to give you a 14 to 22% internal rate of return, which is definitely what you need in order to hit doubles all the way to success. But if I can invest in a company like Viking Cold Solutions, right, at $100 million post-money valuation, and we're on the precipice of securing a multi-billion-dollar contract with Amazon in order to get our product inside of all their facilities. Oh, and by the way, the CEO, James Bell, is a decorated veteran in the United States Marine Corps. His wife is an experienced private equity partner, and they just had their first kid a year ago. And you see who he is as a father, who he is as a husband. That's the person that I invested in for that business.
Love that. Now, jumping back to recruiting firm ownership, what are some of the unspoken expectations of being a firm owner that you didn't expect before you started scaling?
Yeah. I didn't expect that I would have people that would work for me that would have bigger books of business than my own. Okay. And what I mean by that is, there's a buddy of mine, his name is AJ Mahmood. He owns a recruiting firm called Scott Humphrey. They're solely focused on recruiting in the construction industry. So let's just say in practice, that's AJ's main book of business, right? Well, that was me once upon a time, way back in, 2014, 2015, and 2016. My book of business was in energy and industrial. Then I brought in a guy named Casey Knight, who his book of business was in the wealth management space. Well, guess what? When you look at the $14 million in revenue that we do today, about 10 million of that is Casey's book. And my book is about 4 million, right? And so what I can say is AJ Mahmood, right? If you want to scale to $20 million in revenue, like I know that's his BHAG on his Vision Traction Organizer, on his EO implementation Vision Traction deck, it might be with the practice area of somebody that brings in a completely different vertical that you have absolutely no experience in. But it's important to put in the processes and systems in order to attract that person that has the right technical competency in an area that you know nothing about. And so that's what I didn't realize, was that it was perfectly okay to bring in somebody that was bigger and badder than you.
Nowadays, with how much you guys do yearly, what does your day actually look like?
I probably play around on LinkedIn and Instagram. I play pickleball at least 6 days a week. I hang out with my 25-year-old fiance. We have a lot of fun. I don't miss any kids' soccer games, football games, basketball games. I make sure that I lead a life that my children respect and admire. I want them to speak very highly of me with their mom, with their friends, with their teachers, with their friends' parents, right? I want to make sure that I can be a steward of goodwill in my community, because at the end of the day, it's my reputation that's probably far more valuable than I think, the tens of millions of dollars in the bank, for sure.
Okay. Before we jump over to quick fire questions, I know we shot around a lot. It was more like a long episode of quick fire questions.
Yep.
Is there anything else that I didn't cover that you want to go deep on or deeper on?
Well, you know how I met my fiance, right?
Let's give it to me. Let's go over that again. I know how, but not everybody else does.
Yeah. So, God, this is going to sound like an asshole. So in February of 2024, I went to a legacy planning seminar hosted by a gentleman by the name of Andy Bailey. He has a group called Petra Coach, right? And they have this boundless seminar that they do, and they just happen to be in Houston. And coming out of that 6-hour experience, I had this clarity of mind that I wanted to have more children. That was my why. That was my purpose in life. It had nothing to do with money, power, or influence. It had to do with legacy, right? It had to do with my children and the influence that they would be able to create in their community, right? And so I did an exercise with my life coach to see the qualities and characteristics that I loved about my children. I loved that they were straight A students. I loved that they were all athletic, right? Their mom graduated with high honors from Georgia Tech, right? She was also a collegiate athlete. And that's whenever I said, you know what? I want another 4.0 GPA athlete in order to have more children. What I didn't know was that she would also be European as well. And she brought a tremendous amount of those traditional family values from Poland, right? But I went to LinkedIn and I built out a really sophisticated Boolean string. And it was like, swimming or tennis or this, and summa cum laude, valedictorian, 4.0 GPA, right? And junior league, River Oaks, Duchenne, right? All the private schools. And right there in my view was Yulia Koluch, right? A master's student at the University of Houston who was a gold medalist on the Polish national swim team, zero debt, graduated 4.0 GPA with high honors, right? And I was like, oh my God, this is the most unbelievable resume that I've ever seen in my entire life. So sneakily, Benjamin, I went to Instagram, started following her on Instagram, right? Then I waited for her to make a post on LinkedIn. Of course, I had my alerts on, and I commented on her post and she commented back. And we had a little bit of friendly banter. And then I asked her out to coffee. But before anybody calls me the creepy old guy in the young girl's DMs, I did say, hey, just for clarity, like I'm asking you on a date. And then she said, oh, I understand. Absolutely. I'd be very interested. And so then we actually went on our first date 1 year ago from today, last year. That's how I met my future wife. I met her on LinkedIn.
The greatest Boolean search of all time.
Dude, I'll show you the Boolean. It was incredible. And after I announced that, actually in a press release on LinkedIn, I got roasted because people were like, were saying what the Boolean was. Once I actually send you the Boolean, you'll get it. 5'9", blue eyes, blonde hair, gorgeous. Yeah, she's incredible, man. And what I'll tell you, Benjamin, is she's made me a better person, bro. She's made me more grateful, more humble, more generous, more philanthropic. I prioritize nutrition and physical activity, right? She's increased my quality of life exponentially, right? And I think that so many people put such a focus on financial resources. That's just the one category that I bring. And I'm probably like a good business mentor for her as she starts her own marketing consulting business right now. But in the other 7 categories, man, she's just really been fuel for my flame for the last year, dude. It's been incredible.
So she's been helping you become a better person.
Zero doubt.
You always talk about the different parts of your life. And I think you said it's 6 or 7 or 8 different parts of your life to focus on. You talk about having a windy roads for your office. I know many times we talk about the financial success, how to be a better recruiter, how to do better sales, how to do better all these things. How do you start increasing those other parts outside the business and start raising those numbers up in those other areas?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of being very intentional. When I started working with a life coach in January of 2021, we did a State of the Union in those 8 different categories, right? And we were like, okay, well, what does success look like? And where am I at today? Number it on a scale of 1 to 10. And I remember that my average of all 8 categories, it was a 5.8. And then when I redid it on August 1st of this year, it was a 9.2. And so what I say, the short answer is it's been 4.5 years, Benjamin, right? So whenever it comes to freedom and adventure, that probably wasn't something that I tackled until 2025. Right. And when it comes to financial security or legacy or my relationship with my children or my ex-wife or with my mom or with my brother or my executive team, those were all things that I could focus on in the near term. Right. But I had to essentially focus and fix each one very intentionally. Right. It's like whenever I told my life coach, well, I want to get remarried to a woman that's physically fit. Well, the first thing that he said was, well, if she prioritizes physical fitness, you probably have to be physically fit too. And then I was like, I can't run. He was like, why can't you run? I go, well, my knee hurts. And so that day he made me schedule an MRI on my knee. And so I had to schedule the knee surgery to get my knee fixed. And then I had to do 6 months of physical therapy. And then by the time that happened, then it became time for me to focus on working with a personal trainer. And then I had to strengthen my joints in order to be able to play pickleball every single day and prioritize living an active lifestyle. And then I had to live an active lifestyle in order to pull Yulia. And so what I'm going to say is if you want to become the absolute best version of yourself in all 8 categories, you just have to start with the first category because it's all integrated.
How long did it take for you to really knock out one category before really moving on to the next?
You know, sometimes it could be as simple as writing a letter, making an apology, right? Having the humility to have a very vulnerable conversation with somebody that you're related to say, I love you, right? I'm proud of you. Having the humility to say, hey, Zach, you're really someone that I respect and admire because of X, Y, and Z. And every single time I see you, I wish that we spent more time together. And so I know this may come off a little bit weird, but like, I want to be bros. And if you ever are like going to a Rockets game or an Astros game and you ever just think that you want me to like pay my own way and have an extra seat next to you, I would love an opportunity to receive that text message. You know, I think that it requires a lot of humility, vulnerability, and authenticity in order to achieve what you want. That all of us, because we're scared of how others are going to perceive us, we hold things in. That if we just get a little bit more confident about articulating what we want, you'd be surprised at what we actually get.
Love that. Jumping over to the quickfire questions, I feel like I probably should just keep on going deeper down that road because it was good. But flipping it over back to recruiting, you have a person that has no background in recruiting walking into your office. It's their first day on the job.
Yeah.
They're looking around. They see the cars. They've seen you on Instagram. They see the houses. They ask you, what's the one piece of advice that you would give me to have a successful recruiting career? What would you say?
Smile and dial. I think there's so many early career recruiters that want to over engineer the perfect AI solution, the perfect lead generation tool, the best marketing content, whatever it is, right? How do I cheat the system? I'll tell you, while all these companies are focusing in offshoring, automation, and AI, there's going to be one thing that gives you a competitive advantage as a brand new recruiter to the industry is you have the opportunity to outdial every other recruiter in the space. And that if you have accurate data, right, and you do a disciplined job of just reading off the script, man, you can get pretty lucky with the quality of the candidates that you're able to generate as a non-experienced early career smile and dial outbound recruiter. That is the way to success in our industry.
You probably get hit up by other search firm owners a lot. You probably get like questions. What's like the number one piece of advice that you normally give them? And what's the number one piece of advice that you wish you could give them, but they don't ask that question?
Oh, interesting. Oh, build a corporation. Don't build a recruiting firm, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if I answered that right, because if all you do is hire these very entrepreneurial, money hungry, direct hire recruiters that can self-generate their own business, you're kind of building an ecosystem for them to just go off and start their own recruiting firm from scratch. So there's going to be this never ending revolving door, right? And maybe you can do a good job of luring them by just giving them 10% higher on the commission plan. But all that does is it exposes you to the guy that's willing to offer them 10% higher 2-3 years later, right? But if you actually build your business around processes, systems, and technology, then you can create an ecosystem that can operate independently of somebody's skills and experience, that you can actually turn them into $1 million billers. And I think that's what the secret to success is, to systematize the business.
You are now around a lot of different people, whether through different organizations you're part of. I see you speaking at a lot of events you're going to be speaking at. Finish the year strong later on this year. If you had the chance to sit down with any three people, living or dead, for dinner, who would they be?
That's a great question that nobody's ever asked me before. This may sound funny. I don't know why this is my answer, but it would be my grandpa, and my Uncle Bud, just because I miss them. And I think that that's very reflective into this season of life on connection, to where I've got the life coach, I've got the business advisors, I've got the wealth advisors and the trust and estate lawyers and, the Vistage coach. And I've got a really good strategy in order to scale my business in congruency with my life goals. But the time that we have with the people that we love, man, that is finite. And if you squander that, you're going to be in for a very rude awakening whenever that's not on the table anymore.
Your theme of how you talk is different compared to just over a year ago when we last spoke. But even then, I knew like legacy was an important word for you. What do you want your legacy? We'll just say, knock on wood. This is like, I'm not wishing this upon you, but we'll just say if you walked outside, you went to go play pickleball, somehow pickleball got you. And
Oh no!
you're no longer here. What do you want your legacy to be?
What I would hope that, right now people would remember me as a present father, a loving husband and fiance, somebody who was fair, somebody who invested in his people's skills and personal and professional development, right? Just people that would speak highly of me in the community as a person and as a mentor. But what does my legacy look like 50 years from now? Arrogantly, I'm going to say one thing, Benjamin, and it's going to be, I want to see my name in the lights, brother. My last name, Jenson. I have 3 boys today that are going to carry on my last name, and my hope and intent is to have at least 3 more children. And I hope that my name is on a pickleball facility in Warsaw, Poland. I hope that it's on a leaderboard on a UFC title fight, right? I hope that it's going to be remembered in the annals of history in an art museum, that I want my name to be synonymous with being the best of whatever my children choose to do. If they want to be an artist, a musician, an athlete, a businessman, a lawyer, all I do is I want my children to be the best.
With running a business, being an investor in many places, how hard is it to really help your kids be great at what they are and also be a good dad?
Man, I'm going to tell you that it's not hard at all. It really requires intention and humility and vulnerability to have very vulnerable conversations, right? Sitting down with their mom and saying, hey, look, I did this exercise with my life coach, and 10 years from now, I vividly see Luke Jenson playing point guard for Duke, right? And I will pay for every single coaching and development course that we can find him in order to increase his skills development. I want to put him on the best traveling AAU select basketball team, right? I will pay for everything because I vividly see this. Okay. And then sitting down and telling Luke Jenson at 10 years old, hey, look, man, you're welcome to choose whatever you do, but I had this vision, this premonition that this is what you were going to do. This is what you were going to look like. And daddy will make sure that I do every single thing in my power in order for you to achieve that or something adjacent to that if you choose. But I think that if we just hold stuff in and we don't communicate it to our spouse, to our children, to our leadership team, then people are operating on limited information, and all we're doing is just setting ourselves up for failure. But if I can vocalize what I view success looks like, and you disagree with it, then we're probably going to come to an agreement right then and there, and I'm not going to be unhappy whenever you miss the mark. You know what I'm saying? But I think that so many people are scared to have tough conversations. And that's what I would say has been my superpower for the last 5 years working with my life coach.
Have you had to have those tough conversations in the recruiting office too?
All the time, man. We've had to let go of people who I considered some of my very best friends, right? I've had to have a tough conversation with a very high biller who thought that they were entitled to a promotion. Oh, and by the way, we're promoting your office best friend to be the team leader instead of you, right? And so it does require a tremendous amount of humility and gratitude and vulnerability to do what's right and not just hide behind our decisions as an executive, but to truly explain the why behind the what so the person on the other end can understand where you're coming from with that decision, I think is very important.
Have you seen across your organization sometimes the biggest billers are not the best managers, but you're already smiling. We'll say maybe not the number one biller ends up being a better leader?
For years, I used to answer that question by saying that I was a bad manager. And this is probably the very first podcast that I've been on where I could confidently say that the timing just has to be right. The stars need to be aligned. Ego needs to be removed. Pride needs to be removed, right? And I think that's one quality of a great leader and a great manager of people is that they're very empathetic. They seek to understand the why behind the what, and then they can leverage their communication style and tailor it towards motivating and inspiring their team in the way that the individual needs to receive it. And I think that a lot of high rainmaker performers like myself, we tend to just explain things in the way that we need to receive it, but that's rooted in ego and arrogance. And in order to become a great manager, you have to outgrow that.
Love that. Well, Jeremy, we've covered a lot. Like we have gone all over the place without a single straight line. So thank you for that. That's on me, listeners. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
If you're single and you're looking for true love, just build a Boolean string. Just make sure that you have an offer that's worthy of the candidate accepting.
I absolutely love that. Well, Jeremy, once again, this has been awesome. Love chatting with you. I love just like some of the banter on LinkedIn. Before I let you go, if somebody wants to follow you, what's the best place to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place. It's just my name, Jeremy Jenson, Jenson, and I've got a little goat emoji next to my last name. And if you want to follow the personal life of Yulia and myself, follow on Instagram at Jeremy Jenson. Love to follow you back as well.
Awesome. Well, Jeremy, I just want to say thank you. This was fun catching up, and I can't wait for October where you're just going to absolutely rock the house. So for the listeners, there's a lot to unpack here. Systems, success, and what you need to do to just really get your freaking life together. And maybe if you're single, write that perfect Boolean string. Anyways, keep crushing it, guys.
The market's noisy right now. Everyone's using AI, automation, outreach, and most of it sounds the same. If you're a recruitment founder, standing out isn't about doing more, it's about being known. Hoxo's personal brand bootcamp shows you how to build real visibility with the people that matter. Not by going viral, but by showing up consistently and positioning yourself as the go-to in your niche. Their 3X system is helping founders generate inbound leads, strengthen their authority, and grow lean, profitable businesses, often with just a couple of hours a week on LinkedIn. They're giving away a free masterclass that breaks it all down. The link's in the show notes. Check it out before access closes. And if you decide to enroll in the full personal brand bootcamp, you're in luck. Hoxo is giving listeners of the Elite Recruiter podcast a bonus £500 off the cost of the program. Make sure to tell them we sent you.